Hey velomobile fans! The Netherlands is known for its windmills, and Zeeuws-Vlaanderen, where I live, has its share, of course. With the large area to cover here, I've split up my windmill routes into 3 themed routes, and this one is the Western Windmill route. It takes in the mills in Schoondijke, Nieuwvliet, Katsand, Retranchement, Sluis, and Zoutzande. It also includes the scenic city center of Cruda, an Animal Park World War II bunker area called the Groede Podium, and of course scenic riding along dikes and through peaceful farm fields. Most of the mills are still in operation, and all have had quite an interesting history, which I'll tell you about as we ride together. The first mill is in Schoondijke, and it dates from 1884. It replaced the previous mill that blew over in a storm, a fate that seems to befall most of these mills. This is a round stone mill, and the weather vane on top actually comes from the original mill and has the coat of arms of Zeeland. This mill is a rebuild of the 1884 mill because that one burned down in 1900, something that also seems to have happened to quite a lot of mills. This mill lost its roof in 1944 due to fighting in World War II, though the mill was still operational without the roof. The fact that the mills survived largely intact is actually remarkable, as much of this area was destroyed by fighting, including the nearby town of Oostburg, that was completely flattened by Allied bombers. The roof wasn't replaced until 1948, 4 years later, but the mill continued to operate even into the 1970s, at which point it fell into disrepair. The mill was largely repaired in 1993 and is now operable. It also happens to have a store at the bottom of it, which I've never been in, but looks interesting. The Groede Podium is not a windmill, but it's worth sharing a bit of history about. The Groede Podium was built as a bunker village as part of the Atlantic Wall in 1943, with 11 bunkers disguised to look like a small village, with houses including streets and lawns. However, it was heavily fortified with artillery. In 1944, the Canadian Liberation Forces captured it, initially thinking they'd liberated a village. The municipality of Cruda turned it into a deer park after the war, and the bunkers were buried under a layer of dirt. In 2006, the bunkers were unearthed, and the park is now a worker rehabilitation site for former psychiatric patients. The original mill in Nieuwvliet dates from 1619, and that one blew over in 1644 because, yeah, it does get windy close to the coast. That led to a fight between the mill owner in the nearby town of Cruda. Finally, the owners of the blown-over mill were granted permission to build a mill closer to the new village of Nieuwvliet at the location of the current mill, and in 1664 it was up and running. The present mill was built in 1850 and was used until 1954. It was then used as a holiday house and fell rapidly into disrepair. It was scheduled for demolition in the 1970s, but fortunately it was rescued and completely restored in 1979 and 1980. In 2020, it was further renovated, including replacing 20,000 of the bricks and the main tail beam, which actually was replacing the original beam made from the mast of a ship. The earliest mill in Katsand at this site dates from 1662. That one was replaced by another mill in 1721, which then blew over in 1820 because, remember, it is really windy here. And then was subsequently rebuilt by a mill that then burned down in 1897 and was replaced by the current mill. This mill has a kink in the attic area because the builder was afraid that it couldn't handle the wind if it was any taller and decided not to build it further up. The mill was damaged quite a bit during the liberation of Zeeuws-Vlaanderen and restored in 1947 and 48. The mill has variously been used as a guest house and then as a bar with dancing. It burned down yet again in 1974 and was restored 2 years later in 1976. The mill in Retranchement is rather unique in that it's a wooden mill. The original mill here dates from 1643. That mill blew over in 1717 during yet another storm. The rebuild used many of the parts of the original mill and was built 70 meters northwest of that site. It's unknown why 1818 is printed on the breast needle because it doesn't appear there was a rebuild that year of the mill. It remarkably survived World War II, but was badly damaged and had to be rebuilt further in 1948. The mill was taken out of service in 1963 and then bought by the city. It was completely refurbished in 1982 and then again in 2002 due to further rapid decay. At that point, it was restored to its original design, and now the mill, as you can see, is undergoing further repairs so it can once again function properly. I think the mill in Sluis is my favorite mill in this area. Sluis once had as many as 7 mills, this one being the only one that survived. This mill was a corn mill built in 1739, which also milled grain, like all the mills in this area. It was shut down in 1933, and in 1939 the Sanders family bought the mill, restored it, and brought it back into operation. Sadly, in 1944, the mill burned down during very fierce fighting in World War II. It had to again be restored in 1950, and in 1964, a cafe was opened. The mill still operates today, like most of these, and there's a very nice ice cream shop across the street that I recommend stopping at, along with the cafe in the mill. The final mill is in Zoutzande and was built in 1874. Being a relatively recent mill, it hasn't blown over like all the many early mills, but it was heavily damaged in a storm in 1968, so yeah, it's still windy here. Due to the damage, the mill sat unused until 1980 when a rebuild was done. Then again in 1996 it had to be renovated. It was the last regularly operating flour mill in the area. When the miller passed away in 2003, his wife continued to live on the property until she passed away in 2015. Then the gemeente, or the local community, set up a foundation to purchase and restore the mill in 2019. That concludes our Western Windmill tour. I hope you all enjoyed the ride as much as I did, and be sure to check back for future themed tours, including the Central and Eastern Windmill tours, assuming that I took video of the Central tour. I haven't actually found it yet. So anyway, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!